clicking of my thumbs. Something wicked this way comes.
A bit of background. I have had a spirit attached to me my whole life. I remember seeing this Polaroid from when I was like 6 years old, and there was a hazy figure standing right next to me. The spirit has never felt bad in any way. It's more just a friend that I always have. I can't describe exactly how this presence feels, but it's comfortable and familiar. I named him Henry, and always know when it's him messing around in the house, or when it's something else. So I noticed that I hadn't really felt Henry in a while. I could sense other things in the house, but Henry's energy was just gone. Like I said, I felt other entities in the house, and one in particular frightened me. I have had sensitivity to the paranormal my whole life, and I can sense intention from them. However, this one, I couldn't, but it felt dark. One day I was in my kitchen, washing dishes. The sink is against a half wall. On the other side is the living room, which is pretty open in the middle, since all the furniture is against the walls. The glass door plus the windows on the opposing wall let in so much natural light that everything is illuminated. As I was washing the dishes, I casually glanced around the living room. In the center of it stood a dark figure. I quickly shifted my gaze and didn't look at it long because every single instinct told me I would regret it. I didn't look at it long, but the image is still burned into my memory. This figure was shaped like a person, more than 6 feet tall with broad shoulders. The arms were uncomfortably long, and the fingers were too big and too few. The figure was solid black, and so dark that it seemed to mess with the colors of the living room. From my peripherals, I saw that it actually seemed to be rising out of the floor. I listened to my instincts and looked away, made myself focus on the dishes, not pay attention to my peripheral vision, and immediately stopped thinking of the figure that was standing a few feet from me. After a moment, I felt that it had left. I know this was the entity that I had been sensing, and I knew that if I gave it the attention it wanted, that I would regret it. I also know deep down that this entity is the reason that Henry is no longer with me. I don't know how things work in the spirit world, if entities can scare others away or send them away. This was a few years ago that I saw this figure, and I have since gotten rid of it, but Henry has yet to return. Though I had never actually gotten to see or speak with Henry, he was a dear friend that always made me feel safe, and I miss him. My house has been in my family for decades. A side house from the main farm home that's on the main part of the popcorn farm I live on in southern Michigan. I've always felt watched in my house, even when no one else is at home. And I guess, with this experience, I got a first-hand look at why I felt that way. Back in the winter of my sophomore year of high school in 2018, I had just gotten home from a basketball practice that ran late. I did my normal routine of jumping in the shower and going straight to bed, just because I had school in the morning, even though I was as wide awake as could be. My older brother was at work, and my parents were shopping for Christmas shopping, about 15 to 20 minutes away. I got an overwhelming feeling of dread after I got out of the shower, like something was on the other side of the bathroom door, waiting for me. And when I slung the door open with all my courage, nothing was there. But I only got more anxious, so I ran to my bedroom, just an immediate turn left. I jumped in bed and chalked it up to being my normal anxiety of being home alone, even though I know it felt like more than just that. I got into some boxes and laid back in bed and watched some YouTube on my phone. something from my favorite storytime animator to lighten my mood and relax me until my parents or brother got home, whichever came first. Relieved, I heard someone walking into the bathroom quickly, like my dad seems to always do when they're gone for a minute. Just happy someone was home, I leaned back in relief. Just to my right was a small bedside table, about a third of the height of my laying down flat on my bed to the top of my door, so I could still see anything above it easily, and about 3 feet wide, so that's about all that was between me and the door. As soon as a knock came, I felt the feeling of dread, stronger than I've ever felt before, immediately knowing something bad was going to happen. The door creaked open, enough for what I thought was my mum to fit half of her small 5'5" figure through. I asked, "Mum?" in a confident tone. This figure just stared down at me, laying in my bed. Realizing this just wasn't a silhouette of my mum, it was dark, like I could visibly see it with only the moonlight illuminating my room. I proceeded to ask, "Lane?" My older brother, who by no means has a figure of a small woman, he's 6'2". It's just what came out of my mouth, hoping it was him, because who else could it be? The figure, being as dark as it was, shook its head no, slowly, and slowly slipped out of the door and shut the door behind it. After maybe 10 seconds of silence, I sat up, confused and scared. I opened my door, thinking it was my parents messing with me, but their bedroom was straight across from mine, and their room light was off, as was the hallway and the rest of the house, like no one was ever there. I walked out into the kitchen, and there they were, walking in, with arms full of grocery bags, and I asked them if they had come into my room. They said they had just walked in from shopping, and to help them with all they had left. I don't talk about this experience much, only with one other friend about 3 years after this experience. I felt as if my regular anxiety somehow willed this thing to me, like it wanted to mess with me. I spend a lot of time alone in the wilderness, always have since I was a very young kid. My mother allowed me to disappear into the woods at the age of 6 after school and in the summer, just as long as I was back by dinner time. My mother is a great parent, and even is the one that taught me to catch reptiles and amphibians with my bare hands. We don't use nets. As well as taught me how to identify their species, subspecies, and sex. One of my earliest memories of a shadow entity was in the expansive woods behind my house. I was deep in the woods when I was maybe 7 or 8, and had, at the time, been trying to tell people in my family about the things I can see. This caused me to shine like a front porch light in the summertime, and all the bugs were coming. In this sense, it was entities, spirits and the like, that were coming to me or finding me. I had been deep in the woods, most likely following a game trail or tracking an animal, when I noticed a very large, pure black dog-like creature making its way towards me. It was zigzagging through the trees in my direction. There were no wolves in this part of the country, and I knew what coyotes looked like. Hell, I could track one by prints by this age. This wolf-like creature was massive, and it was pure black, like a shadow you could not see through. I had stopped in my tracks and was watching it get closer until I realized how big it was, and that it was no animal. Fight or flight kicked in, and my fear levels went through the roof, so I ran as fast as I could towards the direction of my house. I still remember looking over my shoulder a few times to see it still on my tail, maybe 50 to 70 feet behind me. I just kept running. When I hit my backyard, I didn't stop running till I'd made it to the back door of our house, which opened up into a large 3 seasons room that had large windows all around. My mother was in the kitchen, and I was yelling for her to come to my aid. She came into the room, and I explained I had just been chased by what I was referring to as a hellhound, devil dog, pure black shadow dog, that was giant while gasping for breath. It was then that I looked out the window and I could see the tree line about 40 yards from the rear of the house. Standing at the edge of the woods was a pure black shadow creature that was humanoid and easily 7 to 10 feet tall. When I say pure black, I mean pure black. Can't see through it and was the absence of all light. I stood there and I knew it could see me and it knew I could see it. I remember telling my mother to look, and as I did, it melted into the forest behind it and was gone. At the age of 12, I had moved from the house me and my mother had been in and moved back to our hometown where we were from originally. I spent every weekend with my grandparents and started to work for my grandfather on the weekends at his family business. The family business was monuments. You call them tombstones, and his family had been doing it since 1855. Every evening, me and my grandfather would sit in the living room and watch movies together. He would always fall asleep in his favorite chair during the movies, and I would throw pillows at him to wake him up, then act like I didn't know where the pillow came from. The living room had 2 entrances and was a large vaulted A-frame room on the ground level. One entrance was on the left, which accessed the kitchen. The other was to the right and was a large opening where the front door was, as well as access to the hallway. There was also a balcony above the doorway on the left with a long railing where I used to see a lady in white standing most nights. She would be up there, looking down on us. Every night without fail I would see a pure black shadow, maybe 6 feet tall, that would come down the hallway, then disappear behind the dividing wall, which made its way to the kitchen. I saw this for months and tried to tell my grandfather about it a few times, but he didn't believe me. Their house wasn't exactly happy. It had a lot of negative energy in it due to the amount of arguing, fighting, and screaming matches my grandparents would get into. One night, I was the only one in the living room, and it was about 1 a.m. I was trying to stay up all night because the next morning my grandfather was going to drive me to a sleepaway camp in Maine for a portion of my summer. I was on the couch watching TV when I saw the shadow come down the hallway and then stop at the end of the hallway looking directly at me. No eyes, no face, just a tall, living shadow. I stared back at it for a minute, the fear rising in the pit of my stomach. When I blinked, it was then at the entrance to the living room, like my eyes had been a strobe light. When I blinked again, it was in front of the TV, at the foot of the couch I was laying on. I stared at it. I could not see any light from the TV through it. Nothing. As I stared at it, it then rushed straight forward through the couch, lunging at me. I threw my hands up and closed my eyes. Scared shitless, I opened my eyes, and nothing was there. So I sprinted down the hall to my grandmother's bedroom. My running through the door woke her up, and as I closed the door, she asked me what was wrong. I just quickly said nothing, and jumped into the bed and under the covers. A few months later, my grandfather saw the shadow for himself, and it scared the crap out of him too. He named the entity Higgins for some reason. He apologized for never believing me about the things I saw, and believed me from that day forward. It was around this time that the lady in white taught me how to shield myself, as well as rooms and even houses to clear it out, as well as to keep things from coming in. At this point, I was 15 and knew how to protect myself better, thanks to the lady in white. I was dating a girl who lived in a small town adjacent to the one I lived in. My girlfriend and some of our friends would often hang out in the cemetery in town, and I would teach them the history of the headstones and how they were made. A lot of them were made by my grandfather's family, and a bunch by him and myself also, so they enjoyed the lessons. It's not often people know a 15-year-old monument builder, so it intrigued people. Before you ask, I've spent hundreds and thousands of hours in cemeteries, and have only had maybe 2 experiences in them of note. I don't count when I used to run funerals. That's a common time for more of the deceased to show up and pay their respects to the ones being buried by me. This night, my girlfriend and some of our friends had been in the cemetery and were walking out of the gate due to it being too dark to see. When we closed the wrought iron gate behind us, I glanced up the road to my left, where there was a streetlight at the bottom of a hill. I could see a pure black shadow moving in a strange, janky way, like a puppet, coming down the hill. I stopped and stared at it, which caught the attention of the group I was with. They all stared too, then started saying in scared voices, "What is that?" Then they were all saying in panicked voices, "What the hell is that?" It had made it to the light at this point and passed under it, moving in a shifting, shaky, janky way like a marionette being used by a child. In a blink, it was on one side of the road, then the other, back and forth, and was about 80 feet from us still. I told the group to start moving towards town, and they all took that as run away and sprinted down the road with me on their heels, holding the back. I yelled for them to stop when they had made it 50 feet down the road, and then they all turned to me. I remember telling them that I've dealt with this kind of thing before and told them to keep heading to town and I would be there soon. Then I turned around and started walking towards the entity while building up my light inside of me. My girlfriend grabbed me and was yelling at me to come with them, and I fought her off of me, telling her only I could deal with this and that I would catch up with them and not to worry about me. I took her hands off of me and kept walking towards it. Behind me, she began to break down crying, begging me not to do this, and the rest of the group was scared beyond belief. I remember stopping and looking at her and all of them, and my girlfriend was on her knees crying. And that's the only thing that stopped me. I wouldn't be protecting them by walking towards this being. I would be protecting them by getting them away from it. I walked up to my girlfriend and picked her up from the ground in a pool of tears she was in, and told our friends to follow me and kept walking towards town. That night we built a fire in one of their backyards, and everyone asked me to explain what the hell had happened, and what was that thing, and why was I going to walk towards it alone. So that night, I told them about how I am, the things I see, and how I could use my hands. I remember it dawning on my girlfriend then. That's why when I have cramps, you put your hands on me and they go away. I remember the only reason they believed me is due to what they had seen, and how everyone had seen it together. At 25, I moved across the country to a new state. Me and my girlfriend at the time had been living in an apartment together for about 6 months. It was my first time living in a town and not having woods surrounding wherever I lived, and that took getting used to. My girlfriend had been a nurse, and she also knew how I was. I learned to be more open with my friends and girlfriends at that point, due to the strange things happening nearly daily around me. It was better for them to know up front, so that way I wouldn't need to explain myself when strange things happened or they saw some of the spirits I let follow me around or stay in my home. Only good ones, mind you. I don't let anything negative even onto my property, apartment or house, due to my shielding regimen. That doesn't mean things haven't tricked me though, like I'm going to talk about now. My girlfriend at the time, as I said, was a nurse. She often would have things follow her home because she was slightly sensitive, as well as the fact they could probably sense me around her, even when I wasn't with her. She brought something back one night. I could only feel it in my apartment, and it hadn't revealed itself yet. I was trying to see if it needed help or guidance and why it was there, but it wasn't giving me hardly anything. This was something I even told her at the time, and that I was letting it stay until I figured out what it wanted. She worked nights, and I would have the apartment to myself. This night I knew something was off and not right. I'd been rock climbing all day, so I was physically and mentally exhausted. I was in our bedroom, our dog and cat both on the bed waiting for me to get changed and lay down for the night. As I had gotten changed and was about to get into bed, I could feel something watching me from the hallway. The hallway leading to the bedroom was about 10 feet long. I turned and looked down it, and at the end of the hall was a pure black shadow, the same size as the one my grandfather called Higgins. And, just like the rest of them, it radiated pure fear. At least, it tried to impose fear onto me. After only about 5 seconds of staring at each other, it rushed down the hall at lightning speed towards the bedroom, and I slammed a door on it. My bedroom is my most shielded part of where I live, to help things from bothering me while I sleep. Immediately the door began to shake, and the doorknob began to rattle. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. I knew my girlfriend wouldn't answer due to being at work in the hospital. When my mother answered, I told her to be quiet and to listen. She could hear the doorknob rattling and the door shaking. No, I did not take a video. I called my mother and let her listen. Then, had her talk to me for a few minutes while I tried to wake up my mind from the exhaustion of my day in order to get it clear enough to where I could push this thing out of my apartment using my light. Getting rid of the thing and centering myself is a higher priority than taking a video of a doorknob shaking, just to post it to the internet, only for people to say, "Why didn't you just open the door?" and all the other things people would say to debunk it. I would much rather just fight the damn thing out of my domicile. After about 5 to 10 minutes on the phone with my mother, and me sitting on the floor grounding and meditating to get my mind clear, I told my mother I was ready and thanked her for waking me up. I sat on the bed, crisscrossed, closed my eyes, then pictured my light. I picture it as a ball forming in the center of my chest which, as I breathe, spreads to all of my appendages. When it made its way to my hands and feet, I slowed to spread across the bed in my mental image, then flow across the floor, up the walls, and ceiling closed at the ceiling. I then pushed out of my room and into the entity outside my door, covering every inch behind it as I pushed it through my apartment, like a wave of light. Now, it did push back, and I knew it would. That is why centering myself and waking myself up with the phone call came as priority. It fought back against my wall of light I was driving it out with, feeling its voice mentally which also fought against me. I drove it out of the apartment, then down the stairs and off of the property of the apartment grounds, targeting it specifically. When I was done, I got out of bed, opened my bedroom door, walked down to my kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a beer. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.